Lunar New Year and the Beijing Winter Olympics are near. I can't think of a better way to celebrate than with a bake to represent both. The basic Chinese Shaobing Flatbread, or pastry, truly is an international bread worthy of recognition. It's the representation of bread bakes from the west to the east and every country in between. In fact, even within China, it has more than 100 styles and flavors, including sweet and savory versions with or without fillings. Imagine this, an American hot pocket with a flaky French croissant-style pastry filled like pita bread with layers covered in sesame flavors of China. Now that's a true international bake. The Chinese Shaobing Flatbread version I'm sharing with you today is more like a European pastry without all the work. It's a puffy, layered with toasted sesame roux flatbread that can be filled after baking like pita bread, commonly with braised meats, veggies, or eggs. It's a bread for any meal eaten as a side or main course, though traditionally eaten for breakfast in China. Believe it or not, the Shaobing bread has been around for thousands of years. At least since the Han Dynasty as early as 206 BC. It was traditionally baked in clay ovens. Today, the ingredients and method of baking vary as much as there are countries represented in the Olympics. I have fallen in love with making this bread. The preparation of this bread is quite simple given the complexity of flavors and layers in the finished product. Here's my shout out to China for the inspiration of my recipe. Well, let's get started. For a really cool, unique take on a Western flatbread, my Chinese Shaobing recipe ingredients include yeast, granulated sugar, all-purpose flour, salt, toasted sesame oil, or a neutral oil like avocado or canola, and sesame seeds, white, black, or a combination. We really don't need many ingredients, but first we need to make the dough, so let's start by activating the yeast. All you need is a teaspoon of yeast with a tablespoon of sugar. We're not meant to have a big rise in this dough. It's just meant to get a little bit of activation going and helping it to be puffy and to create those layers. We're just gonna whisk both of those together, and then we're gonna add 3/4 of a cup with just 6 ounces of water. And it should be warm water. It should be between 100 and 110 degrees. And you can easily get that. Just use tap water or filtered water and then heat in the microwave for about 30 seconds. Whisk until the yeast and the sugar have both dissolved. We're just gonna set this aside for 10 minutes until it becomes bubbly and frothy. In the meantime, we're gonna mix the remaining dry ingredient, which basically is just flour and salt. But we wanna sift the flour. Again, we want that light, flaky crust. So I have 240 grams of flour here, which is 2 cups of flour. Just lightly scoop it into your cup and then level it off. So once we sift in our flour here, we're gonna add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then just do a quick stir until it's all combined. Notice our yeast has become bubbly and frothy. In your flour salt mixture, just make a well. I prefer to always make a well when I'm adding wet to dry because it makes it easier to fold everything inward when you have your wet ingredients in the center, and it keeps the flour from flying out. And then we're just going to stir the flour in, combining the wet and the dry. And we're gonna get a sticky dough out of this. It's a little bit stickier than probably a dough that you're used to. And we're going to actually just do everything in this bowl before we let it rest for a few minutes. So all of the kneading, so to speak, is happening with your spoon and in the bowl. And I find using the spatula really works well because I can spread out that dough with the spatula and just make sure that everything has been mixed in well. Take a look at that dough. Just using the spoon, check the bottom of your bowl, make sure it's been all mixed in. Either with some spray or some cooking oil, just spray the top and the sides. And then we're gonna take some plastic wrap. We're gonna cover our bowl and we're gonna let the dough rest for 30 minutes. That's it, there's really no rising time. Although we have yeast in here, we are not expecting or needing the rise in this bread. We really are more interested in the layers than the rise. So we only need to let it rest here, no rising. It's roux time. Roux is a French cooking term that simply refers to cooking together fat, in our case sesame oil, and flour to make a paste. It's used as a thickener in sauces, and it's what's going to be the slathered goo that's on top of our flattened dough before we roll it. For the roux, go ahead and heat a saucepan on low to medium heat. You're gonna add 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of toasted sesame oil or other oil, it's whatever you have. Sesame is traditional here. We're gonna let this heat up until it's nice and hot. Whisk in 80 grams of flour, which is 2/3 of a cup. And we're heating this in order to cook off that raw flour flavoring. To that, we're gonna add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And you're going to whisk continuously for 2 minutes. If you are using a neutral oil like avocado or canola, then you're going to want to stir this consistently for 5 minutes because you want that oil to become toasted. In our case with toasted sesame oil, it's already toasted. We just want to bring out that toasted flavors and to cook off the raw flour. Your mixture is ready when the flour has darkened a little and has a toasty aroma. It's going to be a thick paste. Spoon your flour mixture into a small bowl or even the measuring cup that you use to measure out your oil. We're going to set it aside and let it cool. While our sesame roux continues to cool, go ahead and preheat your oven at 425 degrees. You need to line a large baking sheet with parchment paper and set it aside. And now we're going to work with the dough. You need a heavily floured work surface, and I do say heavily floured because this dough is sticky and we're going to be rolling it out and rolling it up like a cinnamon roll. So we want to make sure that we can do all those things without it being too sticky. Just scoop out that dough onto the floured surface. Flour your hands pretty heavily. Manipulate your dough until it's a nice rough rectangle. Take a well-floured rolling pin and then just start rolling out your dough. We're looking for a 16 by 12 inch rectangle. Once your roux has cooled some, take a look, it really is that paste. It's a thick paste. You're just gonna spoon the paste all over the dough, smooth it out till it's about a 1/2 inch from the edge. Starting at one long end, you're gonna roll this up like you would a cinnamon roll. Don't worry if any of the sesame roux oozes out. When you get to the end, what I would do is spread out your flour a little bit more just to keep this dough from sticking. Rotate it up just slightly so that you can see that crease. All right, now you see that little seam that we have there? We need to seal that. And it could come open as we're manipulating this through the rest of the process, but all you do is you just keep sealing it. If it starts to open up wider than you want, we're gonna cut this into 8 relatively equal sections, and you could just eyeball this, cut it in half. All right, so that's gonna give me 4 on this side and 4 on this side. So I'll cut this half in half, and then this half in half. All right, so I'm gonna get 2, 4, 6, and then that'll be a total of 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8, done. Pick them up individually. Notice the rolls in that from the sesame paste. Seal the edges, keep the center seam on top. Seal those edges, both sides, and then put them aside because we need this workspace down below. With all of the rolls out of the way, take one of them, place it in the center on the floured surface. Again, just sort of ensure those edges are sealed. You want the edges that you've sealed your left and right, and you want that top seal at the top, right? Flour your rolling pin. You're going to roll this out to 5 inches. Okay, once you get it rolled out to 5 inches, you're going to do a trifold. Take the top half, fold it down in the center like an envelope. Take the bottom and fold it up to where you have a nice little roll. You could give them a little bit of a seal. Okay, so now we're going to turn it so that our cut sealed edges are at the top and bottom, or instead of on the right and left. And we're going to do the same thing with our rolling pin. This is how we're getting that flaky roll. Roll it back out to another 5 inches. And then you're going to do another trifold. Top down a third of the way, bottom up, a little bit of a seal, so we have a nice roll. And we're going to repeat with the remaining 7 rolls. All 8 rolls have now been rolled. We're going to let them rest for 10 minutes. Just let them get used to their new shape before we do one last bit of work with them. So cover them with a little bit of plastic wrap. Let's go ahead and get our sesame seeds ready. I prefer to use a flat bottom bowl or container to put my sesame seeds in. I'm going to add enough to fill the bottom, so I'm going to say a little bit less than 1/4 cup here. And I'm going to start out, I'm going to cover half with white sesame seeds, and I'm going to add some black ones for the other half, and then just set those aside until we're ready for them. Uncover your rolls. You probably should have a small bowl of water next to you. Take that first one. Notice that's puffy. It's the first one that we rolled up. You want to use the smooth side of that, which should be the bottom. Dip your fingers a little bit. Rub it on the bottom side. Place your roll into the seeds. Press slightly so the seeds cover the bottom of your bread. And with the sesame seeds face up, take your rolling pin and roll it out to a 6 by 3 inch rectangle. Use a spatula is good. And then you're just going to pick it up, place it on a prepared parchment lined baking sheet. Just slide it off of your spatula. We're going to put these about 1 to 2 inches apart, and we'll use the whole sheet. We're going to repeat with the remaining rolls. Add a little bit of flour if you need to, just so the bottom of the dough doesn't stick. I have 4 rolls left. Now I want to do a combination of white sesame seed and black sesame seed. So just try to get equal amounts, and then we continue. Our Chinese Shaobing pastry flatbread is ready for the oven. We're going to place the baking sheet on the center rack in the oven, and we're going to bake for 12 to 15 minutes or until the tops are golden brown. Fresh out of the oven. You can serve and enjoy them right now as is, or you can cut into them and then add your favorite fillings. Check them out. Nice how golden brown they are. You can see our little seam on the bottom, which is great. That's where we would prefer to have it. Although I've got one where I accidentally put the seam on the side. But the idea is to, when you roll it out that last time, try to put that top seam on the bottom because you've got that smooth on the top. My understanding is the way you can do it in China is you can take some scissors and you just cut along the edge and you open up like a book. I'm just going to use my knife here, just slice the edge, my 3 edges. Notice how crispy that top is. It's like an American Hot Pocket. And then you open it like a book and notice all the layers. How cool is that? Hey, Scott.
Hey.
Thanks for joining me.
You're welcome.
In honor of Lunar New Year and the Beijing Olympics coming up very soon, both of them beginning of February, we are celebrating with the Chinese Shaobing Flatbread.
Okay.
I'm not going to hold you up. Go ahead and give it a taste. By the way, it's the year of the tiger. Did you know that?
I did not.
Well, for you at home, if you don't know, tigers are courageous, duh, adventurous, of course, confident people. What are your thoughts?
I like the layers. That's different. I like the sesame seeds on top. Is there other sesame flavoring that's included in this?
Yes, sesame oil in the layers.
So that's probably the sesame that I'm tasting is the
Absolutely.
sesame oil.
Yes, so if you at home, if you decide to use a different oil, you won't have that sesame flavoring except for the sesame seeds on top. So you can make it with or without the toasted sesame oil.
Okay.
But I think the toasted sesame oil is what makes it really, it's probably the significant Asian flavors that we sort of expect in food.
Yeah, nice crusty exterior with those layers and the inside. It's different. It's a different bread.
And do you like it?
Yeah, I like it.
You've actually eaten some of this over the past several weeks. You've had it by itself. You've also had it with an egg and scallion omelet, sort of as a sandwich.
This is a good bread for a sandwich because it's not going to be too bready, and I know some people don't want a sandwich that hides the flavors of the sandwich itself. So I think it would work.
And it's considered a flatbread, so it's not meant to be really thick. Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
And giving your perspective. What a great no-knead, no-rise type of bread to enjoy during their Lunar New Year celebration and the Olympic Games. Give it a try and add your favorite fillings as we've been doing. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Until next time, go bake the world.